Freeze! This is an internet stick-up. Sit down and subscribe. Fool!
Billy Bob's Space Trucker. Chapter Sees OC. I've got most of the songs I know I want for the dance-off. But if anyone really, absolutely, has to have a certain song, tell me. If I like it, I may toss it in there. Before anyone asks, yes, YMCA is making an appearance. You all knew it would happen. Chapter C's cast. Matriarch Liasbeth approached the entrance to her private hunting reef. Her servants had released a few Veruvian slugs and some Herulacid otters in the large underwater chamber for her to hunt. Technically, they were semi-intelligent creatures on path for full intelligence, but the Crustacean matriarchs had blocked all attempts to change their status from unprotected wildlife to the much more strictly regulated potentially intelligent species list. They were simply too tasty, not to mention it was more fun to hunt something a bit smarter than usual. For her, specifically, she enjoyed the fear in their eyes before she ended them. You only got that with something that had a glimmer of personality behind those eyes. Her favorite was, of course, their ancient nemesis, the Libertonians. She had been a juvenile when she tasted them in the last galactic war. They had resisted the idea of a galactic government that regulated and suppressed species to operate at around an equal level of capability in order to make things fair. The Libertonians argued for more freedom, less regulations, and why shouldn't they? They were stronger, faster, smarter, and they could fly. She wasn't ashamed to admit her species was jealous of their ability to fly. Who among the galactic community wasn't jealous of those who could stretch their wings and take off into the sky? The Crustaceans could breathe both water and air and swim the ocean depths with ease. But to fly, it hadn't been difficult for them to convince the other races to fall in line and agree to regulation. After all, only the exceptional suffered. And the thing about being exceptional, they were the exception, and few species could contain their jealousy of the species that were superior to them. They fought valiantly, but in the end, they were defeated by sheer numbers. The Crustaceans' greatest victory was in keeping their enemies alive, however, in reducing them to a single colony off their home planet and a bare minimum fleet, to force them to watch the galaxy continue as they were left powerless. They refused to be entirely beaten, of course, which was why, from time to time, the matriarch got to dine upon a spy or diplomat that went missing. Being the galaxy's secret police had its advantages in acquiring the rarest of food, especially if eating such food was against a dozen different regulations and laws. Somehow, that made the meal tastier. Her mandibles quivered in anticipation of her feast tonight. But before she could open the hatch and begin her hunt, she heard her vid screen chime at her. Normally she'd ignore it, but this was the screech of her emergency line. The matriarch hissed in annoyance and moved over to the vid screen, turning it on with one of her foreclaws.
What?
She hissed out and saw cast leader Cleroy cower for a moment.
I'm sorry, Matriarch, but there have been more developments with the Libertonian diplomat.
All 12 of her eyes narrowed as she examined the screen and the cast leader looking out at her.
The one with a copy of the suppression device, you mean? The one who could possibly end the galaxy as we know it? The one who was traveling alone to try and avoid detection and should have been captured cycles ago? The one who is trying to make it to the capital for the Grand Council? That diplomat? Is this the diplomat you speak of, Cleroy? As if there was any other diplomat that I have ordered you to track. Is this that diplomat you're referring to? The same diplomat who has found a Death World mercenary that killed a hunter-killer squad and injured cast leader Bleebob?
There was a pause as Cleroy waited, unsure if the matriarch was going to continue.
Yes. Oh well, now that I know which diplomat you're referring to, what is it? The Death Welder is a grave threat, and we can't find them. They haven't been stopping at refueling stations, but the ship only has a single pilot. We're unsure how they're avoiding detection, but I assure you we're doing our best to track them down. Clearly your best isn't good enough. Have all available cast leaders in the sector patch into this mission. Criminals, smugglers, pirates, they all take a back seat to this diplomat. Yes, Matriarch, but about the Death Welders, I think it's a mistake to start moving against their extrasolar colonies. This American subspecies seems to be truly independent of their larger government, which has been cooperative so far. Cleroy, I wasn't aware you'd doubled in size, grown 6 new limbs, 8 eyes, and changed your reproductive organs. When did this happen?
The cast leader was clearly confused.
I haven't, Matriarch? Oh, so you're not a matriarch then? No, Matriarch. Then why are you questioning our decision? The Council has decided the easiest way to end this situation is to start conquering colonies and threatening to kill these filthy humans until the mercenary surrenders the diplomat. If you don't want that to happen, then find her on your own. But Matriarch, the new footage I've found, if you read the report, it's clearly fake Cleroy. Such a species can't exist. Nothing that strong is that small. And even if they are good fighters, we can use our police action to justify a full galactic war against them. We defeated the Libertonians, we can stop these Hyomans. And if you can't find this mercenary, it's clearly because he's terrified. Likely cowering in some hole like the vermin he is. Soiling himself in fear as our hunter-killers close in on him. There will be no mercy for this. Billy Bob's Space Trucker.
Why would you sign up for this contest?
Because I'm a shoo-in.
Doesn't translate.
Because I can't lose. They've based this on human dancing from the mid-1900s as far as I can tell. I listen to this music all the time, and I'm a good dancer. I crushed those space fleckos at that refueling station, remember? Oh, I think your translator isn't properly calibrated.
Yeah.
They were supposed to be good dancers, right? And they got beat so bad they tried to attack me. And then I knocked them flat.
Billy Bob, this competition is supposed to be for groups. You'll have to do all the dances solo. You can't tell me that. Oh, right, your species has incredible endurance. Okay, well, you're supposed to have costumes. Did you think about that? Where are you?
Emily stopped, looking around as she remembered they were in the middle of a black market station.
You need me to buy you some things, don't you?
Please? It's a bit of a rush, but it's simple stuff. I have a few pieces I keep in my truck for Halloween. I just need to get a few items to complete some others.
Don't you have money?
Most of it went to fuel. I was supposed to get paid in real credits by
You should know the space hippies use real credits as little as possible.
Hey, I'm new to the galaxy. I know now. Come on, Emily, please.
No.
Please, come on.
Billy Bob, no.
Please, pretty please, with a cherry on top. Come on. I'll let you take whatever we win. Unless it's a trophy, I get that.
You won't let this go, will you?
Not a chance.
Fine, but you have to promise to do what I want at the next stop.
Yes! Billy Bob grinned. Deal, I swear. Whatever you want. Emily sighed out and handed him her trade cube before he turned and rushed off to whatever store he'd found costumes in. She returned to the restaurant and sighed out. The waiter had left their drinks on their table, and she sat heavily, taking a sip of the hot beverage she'd ordered. She couldn't believe the energy Billy Bob had. He was downright manic when he discovered something that excited him. If this was how adult humans behaved, what were their children like? She shuddered at the thought. It was a few minutes before he returned with a big smile on his face as he handed the cube back to her and sat down. She shook her head as he sipped at his own drink. Then he waved the waiter down, asked for a bunch of ice, and once he got it, dropped a few chunks of ice into the tea to cool it off further. Then he drank it all in one go as Emily stared.
How do you drink so much caffeine at once? Don't you get sick?
What? No. This is just like 1 cup of tea. You don't know anything about caffeine until you're drinking a Super Space Extreme Triple Caf Express mocha with extra cream.
What? Is...
She frowned and shook her head.
I don't know what that is.
It's a shit ton of caffeine, sugar, chocolate, and cream, and then usually some whiskey because that really warms you up.
Human diets are so strange. You can just process large amounts of caffeine.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm drinking regular stuff, I can't drink enough to kill me. Unless I'm like holding it in and my bladder bursts. But that's a dumb way to kill myself. She blinked a bit, her mask blank, as she tried to figure out how to proceed.
And you also intake capsaicin.
Yeah, depending on what kind of food you're eating. Latin stuff, some Asian things. But I say stay away from anything made by Indians. As far as I can tell, they're just pissed at how much beef we eat, so they don't actually make food.
Then, what do they make?
They make puree terrorism that leads to gut-wrenching ass explosions that makes you feel like you're shitting fire. Emily grimaced. The kind of screaming shits that turns atheists into religious fanatics, begging any god who will listen for mercy.
Billy Bob? What?
I'm not the one who tries to pass off that dog diarrhea as food.
Billy Bob, stop!
She gasped out, 2 of her hands covering her face, the other 2 gesturing as she tried to drive the images from her head. She was fairly sure her translator wasn't even getting the right words, but what it sounded like was making her sick.
There is no way that's accurate.
You've never had Indian food. I'm telling you, those vegetarians can hold a grudge for eating their sacred animal.
Stop, enough. You'll make me sick.
He shrugged at that and waved over the waiter to order another space tea. Emily sighed out and shook her head as he looked at her. Tell you what, why don't I treat you to some real American cooking? Real old classic stuff, the things I had when I was a kid and my mum wanted me to feel warm and comfy. Emily paused at that and slowly nodded.
That sounds interesting, actually.
Good? Can you handle dairy?
Well, I won't know until I eat it, will I?
Good point. All right, I'll go talk to the chef, see if he's got the stuff in stock. He paused and looked at Emily. She looked back. He stood there, starting at her without speaking. She was about to ask and then sighed and pulled her cube back out, setting it into his hand. Thanks. Emily sat at her seat, wondering just what she was getting herself into. It took about 10 minutes before he returned with 2 plates and 2 bowls. She tried to figure out what she was looking at. Squares of bread, and the soup sort of looked like... It couldn't be filled with blood, could it? Grilled cheese with bacon on Texas toast and tomato soup with sour cream.
Oh, so it's not blood?
What? No, Jesus. It's just some mushed up plants and herbs and stuff. Apparently human food is a huge seller with the underground omnivore and carnivore markets. The space gobos are spreading it through their stations already.
Space gobos? You humans shorten everything, don't you?
Yep. He sat down, pulling his square apart as she saw the strings of the yellow, with some sort of reddish, crispy something inside of it. He dunked part of it into the soup and then bit that portion off, grinning as he clearly enjoyed it. Emily slowly dipped a corner of her own square into the soup, removing her mask after glancing around for a moment and then snapping at the corner. She quickly opened her mouth, gasping and waving a hand in front of it while he laughed. Sorry, it's kinda hot. She nodded and took a sip of her water before she settled down and thought it over.
That's pretty good.
He smiled and dunked another bit of his. Well, now it was a triangle. Either way, he dunked it and held it in the air. She looked at him and he wiggled it in the air for a moment and slowly she dunked part of hers before holding it up. He bumped her square with his triangle. Cheers! They ate the rest of it, then bit by bit, as hers cooled off a bit more. There were a couple moments where she tried to pull away a piece and the yellow stuff just kept following her, which had Billy Bob laughing as she tried twisting and turning to get it to stop following her head. He didn't let her finish her square though, and instead had her drink up the soup until just the last bits were sticking to the bowl. Then he showed her how to scrape off the last of the soup with the last of her square.
So that's an American meal?
One of them. Classic stuff from when I was a kid. Hell, the first thing I learned to make myself was a grilled cheese, because microwaving hot dogs doesn't count. He laughed for a moment, and Emily felt rather full and satisfied.
Well, if that's your style of cooking, I think I wouldn't mind it, but not all the time. Your meals are rather large for my kind.
I'll make you a smaller portion next time then. Don't want you getting sick. She smiled at that and shook her head.
You're full of surprises. Your species is small, yet intensely strong. Your endurance is off the charts and your diet. You can fight, fly, and cook reasonably well.
She shook her head again.
Not to mention, you're one of the battle dance species.
Well, we aren't really. I just learned how to dance really well because I like it. We have a few cultures that dance before a battle, but they mostly lost to guys who just shoot them instead of letting them finish. Aside from sports, I mean. Not legal to shoot the home team as they dance around. She wasn't quite sure if he was serious or not.
What kind of war do you engage in?
Total.
What?
Total war, mostly. Every so often it's just armies against armies out in fields and stuff. Worked that way for a while. But plenty of times, and especially after America became independent nations, fought for keeps. Destroying everything they couldn't keep. Ravishing supply lines, starving whole countries. Fuck, the Russians play for keeps. They burn their own shit just to spite the guys invading them, and people still kept trying to invade.
They'd burn their own land?
And towns and supplies, whatever they couldn't take or defend. If they could time it properly, they'd burn it with the enemy advancing into the fire. This from a country that's snow for most of the year. Emily frowned at that.
Truly?
Well, it's fucking cold. -40 in the winter, I think. She balked at that.
What? But your species is okay in standard temperatures?
Yeah. I mean, California, where I'm from, is often in the low 100s in the summer. She gasped again.
What? Your species survives just fine in both -40 and the low 100s?
In Fahrenheit. I'm not sure if your translator is loaded with that, or space metric. -40 is actually the same in both. Well, I think the high end would be the space metric. He squinted a bit as he tried to remember. 50? Maybe? Mid-40s?
Oh. Yes, I think that's more reasonable then. Why do you have 2 units for temperature?
Because ours is better.
What? Than whose?
Look, we shouldn't discuss units of measure used on Earth. It's a sore subject because the world wants the Americans to change and we tell them to shove it.
Shove what?
I'll try and explain it later. She shook her head slowly, clearly confused. Then he perked up. My implant pinged. My costumes are ready. Come on, Emily. You've got to come watch me dance. She sighed out as he jumped and rushed out, and she had to follow after him, quickly pulling her mask back on. He was halfway down the street when she saw a squad of fillers enter the cultural dance center, however. She gasped softly as she feared they might be looking to settle the score with the space trucker. Billy Bob! She cried out and cursed. It seemed like the dance competition was going to be a lot more competitive than she thought. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob's Space Trucker.
What is going on here?
It's your first time dealing with a stick-up? Don't worry, everything will be fine. Just follow the procedure.
Okay.
What are you doing? He's not robbing us. We're not-
Content creator.
It's our job to rob him.
Oh, right. Okay. Drop your
Subs.
bag!
Please, I have children.
Good to know. We'll come for them next.
Yes.
That's a pretty watch.
No, please, it belonged to my grandpa.